the House will have under consideration House Bill number 790, conjoined from District 9.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to dispense with the further reading of House Bill 790.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection?
I'm objecting.
Lady from 1 is objected. The clerk may read.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 790 by Ways and Means Committee, an act relating to public school funding, amending Section 33-1002 Idaho Code to revise provisions regarding funding for literacy intervention, amending Chapter 8, Title 33 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 33802B Idaho Code to provide that the ballot at an election to authorize certain levies shall include a disclosure, to provide that a ballot question must be accompanied by the disclosure in order to be binding, and to provide that a court must declare the outcome of a ballot question invalid under certain circumstances, amending Chapter 8, Title 33 Idaho Code by the addition of a new Section 33802C Idaho Code to provide that a school district shall use supplemental levy revenues only for certain purposes, declaring an emergency and providing an effective date, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Idaho. Section 1, that Section 33-1002 Idaho Code be and the same is hereby amended to read as follows. 33-1002 Education Support Program. The Educational Support Program is calculated as follows. 1, state educational support funds. Add the state appropriation, including the monies available in the public school income fund, together with all miscellaneous revenues to determine the total state funds. 2, from the total state funds, subtract the following amounts needed for state support of special programs provided by the school district. A, pupil tuition equivalency allowances as provided in Section 33-1002B Idaho Code. B, transportation support program as provided in Section 33-1006 Idaho Code. C, feasibility studies allowance as provided in Section 33-1007A Idaho Code. D, the approved cost for border district allowance provided in Section 33-1403 Idaho Code as determined by the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. E, the approved cost of exceptional child approved contract allowance provided in Section 2 of Section 33-2004 Idaho Code as determined by the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. F, salary-based apportionment calculated as provided in Section 33-1004 through 33-1004F Idaho Code. G, unemployment insurance benefit payments according to the provisions of Section 7213-49A Idaho Code. H, for expenditure as provided by the Public School Technology Program. I, for employee severance payments as provided in Section 33-521 Idaho Code. J, for distributions to the Idaho Digital Learning Academy as provided in Section 33-1020 Idaho Code. K, for charter school facility funds and reimbursement payments pursuant to Section 33-52085 Idaho Code. L, for an online course portal as provided in Section 33-1024 Idaho Code. M, for advanced opportunities as provided for in Chapter 4, Title 33 Idaho Code. N, for additional math and science courses for Idaho high school students as provided in Section 33-1021 Idaho Code. O, for leadership premiums as provided in Section 33-1004J Idaho Code. P, for master teacher premiums as provided in Section 33-1004I Idaho Code. Q, for the supportive provisions that provide a safe environment conducive to student learning, maintain school discipline, and allocation of $300 per support unit. R, an amount specified in the appropriation bill for the public schools educational support fund for counseling support as provided in Section 33-1212A Idaho Code shall be distributed for grades 8 through 12 as follows. 1, for school districts and public charter schools with 100 or more students enrolled in grades 8 through 12, a pro rata distribution based on students enrolled in grades 8 through 12, or $18,000, whichever is greater. 2, for school districts and public charter schools with fewer than 100 students enrolled in grades 8 through 12, $180 per student enrolled in grades 8 through 12, or $9,000, whichever is greater. S, an amount specified in the public schools educational support appropriation bill for literacy intervention. The disbursements made to the school districts and public charter schools shall be calculated as follows. 1, 50% based on average full-time equivalent enrollment for students in kindergarten through grades 3 as of the first Friday in November. 2, 50% based on the number of kindergarten through grade 3 students who move to a full level or are proficient from spring to spring administration of the statewide reading assessment in the prior fiscal year, or if there is not a prior spring assessment for the student from fall to spring. 3, funds shall be distributed to the school district or public charter school where the student is enrolled and takes the statewide reading assessment. Any school district or public charter school that has greater than 1 but fewer than 5 students in kindergarten through grade 3 will receive a minimum of $2,000. Economically disadvantaged students shall count as 1 3/4 students for the purpose of calculating the distribution of funds in subparagraph 2 of this paragraph. T, for mastery-based education as provided for in Section 33-1632 Idaho Code. U, for pay for success contracting as provided in Section 33-125 25B Idaho Code v. Any additional amounts as required by statute to effect administrative adjustments or as specifically required by the provisions of any bill of appropriation to secure the total educational support distribution funds. 3, average daily attendance. The total state average daily attendance shall be the sum of the average daily attendance of all the high school districts in the school. State Board of Education shall establish rules setting forth the procedure to determine average daily attendance and the time for and method of submission of such report. Average daily attendance calculation shall be carried out to the nearest 100th. Computation of average daily attendance shall also be governed by the provision of each section. 33-1003A Idaho Code. Support units. The total state support units shall be determined by using the table set out hereafter called computation of kindergarten support units, computation of elementary support units, computation of secondary support units, computation of exceptional education support units, and computation of alternative school support units. Sum of all the total support units of all school districts of the state shall be a total state support units. Computation of kindergarten support units, average daily attendance, attendance divisor, units allowed, 41 or more, 41 or more is computed. 30 to 4099 ADA 1, 26 to 3099 ADA 0.85, 21 to 2599 ADA 0.75, 16 20.99 ADA 0.6, 8 to 1599 ADA 0.5, 1 to 799 ADA count as elementary. Computation of elementary support units, average day attendance, attendance divisor, maximum units allowed, 300 or more ADA, 15, 23 grades 4, 5, and 6, 22 grades 1, 2, 3, 1994 to 95, 91 grades 1, 2, 3, 95 to 96, 20 grades 1, 2, 3, 96 to 97, and each year thereafter. 160 to 299 ADA 20, 8.4, 100 to 159 ADA 19.6.8, 71.1 to 109, 99, 16 to 47, 21, 51 to 71 ADA 15 to 4.0, 36.6 to 51.6, 13, 2.8, 16.6 to 33.5 ADA 12, 1.4, 1 to 16.5 ADA NA. 1, computation of secondary support units, average daily attendance, attendance divisor, maximum amount units allowed, 750 or more, 18.5, 47, 400 to 749.99, 16, 28, 300, 399, 14.5, 22, 200, 299, 13.5, 17, 100, 199, 12, 9, 99.9 or fewer units allowed as follows: grades 7 through 12, 8, grades 9 through 12, 6, grades 7 through 9, 1 per 14 ADA, grades 7 and 8, 1 per 16 ADA. Computation of exceptional education support units, average daily attendance, attendance divisor, maximum units allowed, 14 or more, 14.5, 1 or more is computed, 12 to 1399, 1, 8 to 1199.7, 4 to 799.5, 1 to 399.25. Computation of alternative school units. Computation of alternative school units shall include grades 6 through 12, pupils in attendance, attendance divisor, maximum units allowed, 12 or more, 12, 1 or more is computed. In applying these tables to any given separate attendance unit, no school district shall receive less total money than it received if it had a lesser average daily attendance in such separate attendance unit. In applying the kindergarten table to a kindergarten program of fewer days than a full school year, the support unit allowance shall be a ratio to the number of days of a full school year. The attendance of students attending an alternative school in a school district reporting fewer than 100 secondary students in average daily attendance shall not be assigned to the alternative table if the student is from a school district reporting fewer than 100 secondary students in average daily attendance, but shall instead be assigned as a secondary table for the school district in which they are attending the alternative school unless the alternative school in question serves students from multiple districts reporting fewer than 100 secondary students in average daily attendance. The tables for exceptional education and alternative school support units shall be applicable only for programs approved by the State Department of Education following rules established by the State Board of Education. Monies generated from the computation of support units for alternative schools shall be utilized for alternative school programs. School district administrative and facility costs shall be included as part of the alternative school expenditures. 5, state distribution factor per support unit. Divide educational support distribution funds after subtracting the amount is necessary to pay the obligations specified in subsection 2 of this section by the total state support units to be secured. The state's distribution factor per support unit. 6, district support units. The number of support units for each school district in the state shall be determined as followed. A1, divide the actual average daily attendance, excluding students approved for inclusion in the exceptional child educational programs for the administrative schools and each of the separate schools and attendance units by the appropriate divisor from the tables to support units from this section. Then add the quotients to obtain the district's support units allowance for regular students, kindergarten through 9 through 12, including alternative students. Calculations in application of this subsection shall be carried out to the nearest 100th. 2, divide the combined totals of the average daily attendance of all preschool, kindergarten, elementary, secondary, juvenile detention centers, and students with disabilities approved for inclusion in the exceptional child program by the district by the appropriate divisor of the table from the computation for exceptional education support units to obtain the number of support units allowed for the district's approved exceptional child program. Calculations for this subsection shall be carried out to the nearest 100th for more than one unit is allowed. 3, the total number of support units of the district shall be the sum of the total support units for regular students, subparagraph 1 of this paragraph, and the support units allowed for this approved exceptional child program, paragraph 2 of this paragraph. B, total district allowance educational program, multiply the district's total number of support units carried out to the nearest 100th by the state distribution factor per support unit, and to this product add the approved amount of programs to the district provided in subsection 2 of this section to secure the district's total allowance of the educational support program. C, district share. The district share of the state apportionment is the amount of the total district allowance. Paragraph B of the subsection. D, adjustment of district share. The contract salary of each non-certified teacher shall be subtracted from the district share as calculated from the provisions of paragraph C for this subsection. 7, property tax computation ratio. In order to receive state funds pursuant to the section, a charter district shall utilize the school maintenance and operation property tax computation ratio for the purpose of calculating its maintenance and operation levy that is no greater than that which is utilized in tax year 94, less 0.4% as used herein. The term property tax computation ratio shall mean a ratio determined by dividing the district's certified property tax maintenance and operational budget by the actual or adjusted market value for assessment purposes as such values existed on December 31st of 1993. Such maintenance operation levies shall be based on the property tax computation ratio multiplied by the actual or adjusted market value for assessed purposes as such values existed on December 31st of the prior calendar year. Section 2, that Chapter 8, Title 33, Idaho Code B, and the same is hereby amended by the addition thereof a new section to be known and designated as Section 33802B, Idaho Code, to read as follows. 33802B, disclosures and election to authorize supplemental levy. 1, at an election to authorize a levy pursuant to sections 33802.3 or 5 Idaho Code, the ballot shall include a disclosure separate from the ballot question of the purposes for which levy revenues will be used. The disclosure shall be set forth in a simple, understandable language. B, include a detailed description of the purposes for which the levy revenues will be used and the approximate amount of levy funds to be allocated for such purpose, that each school district electors have fair notice of the specific items the levy revenue shall support. And C, be placed immediately upon the ballot question on the ballot. 2, in order to be binding, a ballot question to authorize a levy pursuant to section 33802.3 or 5 Idaho Code must be accompanied by the disclosure described in section 1 of this section, as well as any other disclosure or information required by law. 3, upon a determination by a court pursuant to section 3420.01a Idaho Code that a school district failed to comply with the provisions of this section, the court must declare the outcome of the ballot question invalid and award court costs and fees to the prevailing party. Section 3, that Chapter 8, Title 33, Idaho Code B, and the same is hereby amended by the addition thereof a new section to be known and designated as Section 33802C, Idaho Code, to read as follows. 33802C, supplemental levies, purposes of which revenues are used. School district shall use supplemental levy revenues only for those purposes identified pursuant to Section 33802B1B, Idaho Code. The School District Board of Trustees shall annually publish prior to its regular July meeting a summary of levy revenues and the items for which such revenues were used, alongside the copy of the disclosure included in the ballot pursuant to Section 33802B, Idaho Code. Section 4, an emergency existing therefore, which emergency is hereby declared to exist. This act shall be in full force and effect on or after July 1st of 2022.
Gentleman from 9 to open the debate.
Mr. Speaker, so this Bill 790 modifies the distribution formula for literacy dollars. If you look on page 2 and 3, the literacy dollars were or have been sent out based on how many kids fail the IRI, the fall IRI, and now 50% will go out based on enrollment in K, 1, 2, and 3, and 50% will go out on how many kids are proficient or progressing toward proficiency in K1, 2, and 3. Then the last couple of pages, section 2 and 3, there's some transparency language on school district levies. You have to list the purposes of the levy, and you have to give approximate amounts of the levy, and you have to spend the levy money on those projects. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Green light, please.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Hearing none. Gentleman from 34.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reading this looks like a redo of permission to mention other legislation, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman may refer to other pieces of pending legislation.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, this looks like a redo of Senate Bill 1373. Is that true? And if so, is there any differences that we should be aware of how this is different?
Gentleman from 9.
Mr. Speaker, if you look on page 2, there's two key differences. On line 34 and 35, they scratched out that these funds will be spent pursuant to section 33-1807. And what that gives a list of, you can spend on this, you can't spend on that, 10% on this and that. There was a lot of micromanaging in the schools and how to spend this money. That's gone. And the reason is because now they've got to have the flexibility to spend that money so they can get kids proficient. Each school district is going to be a little bit different. How do you want to spend that money to get kids proficient or to make progress towards proficiency? And then, Mr. Speaker, the last couple of pages, the levy language is all new.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a follow-up?
Will the gentleman yield to another question?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. Is this designed to give districts the option and the encouragement to expand their literacy programs by doing all-day kindergarten?
Gentleman from 9.
Mr. Speaker, school districts have the flexibility to do extended day during the year. They can do summer school, they can do kindergarten, they can do smaller class sizes, they can hire more aides, they could buy curriculum, they could bring the low kids in on Fridays if they're a 4-day week. They have the flexibility to do what they want.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield?
Will the gentleman yield further?
Certainly.
Thank you,
Gentleman
Mr.
yields.
Speaker. Good gentleman. In your answer, I didn't hear the words all-day kindergarten. I just want clarity on that. Would this be available for expanding to all-day kindergarten?
Gentleman from 9.
Mr. Speaker, right now the state of Idaho pays for a half-a-day kindergarten. This money could, if a district so chooses, if they have the room and so forth, and if they have the philosophical bent, they could spend it for the other half a day of kindergarten. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my debate against the other legislation today by reiterating it today. This is a literacy program that is designed to enhance K through 3 reading. This is the extension of prior reading programs. Years ago, we tried it out with $5 million. Then the next year, $8 million for literacy, K through 3. Then $13 million. And now the base is $26 million. If you look at the SOP on this bill, it is adding $46 million to the base of $26 million. So now we're up to $72 million for K through 3 literacy programs. I would argue, first of all, with all that spending over all these years, we should expect positive results. In the handout the good gentleman passed out with regard to the prior legislation, we saw disappointing results from all of this money going into literacy programs. In fact, there were declines in the IRI, there we go. I can read too. Reading scores. And in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, a little bit level, and then third grade, all of these declines, they cannot be blamed on a pandemic. These declines began before the pandemic began and was accentuated by the pandemic. So we're spending more and more money, getting less and less results. I am for kids being able to learn how to read K through 3, but putting money into a literacy program that's not yielding results says we're on the wrong path. We have good teachers, we have good schools, and I think we have good students. We should find the way that works. This way apparently isn't working, adding more and more money. $72 million in a literacy program for what I think is already in the job description of K through 3 education. That reading is one of those fundamentals of K through 3 education, is it not? Why do we have to adopt another program and add more money for what is already supposed to be happening in schools? I argue that $72 million is a lot of money. In fact, if we wanted to instead give teachers raises to keep and attract the best teachers in Idaho for teaching reading, this would amount to $4,400 per teacher across the state. Every time we introduce a new education program with new spending for it, it becomes a new program that competes with teacher pay. $72 million is going to be competing with teacher pay ongoing. The SOP says this is ongoing. We ought to be very careful about creating new programs and millions of dollars to fund them when we need to attract and retain the best teachers. Also, I'll finish with this. I do have constitutional concerns because if some districts have the capacity, building-wise and teacher-wise, to expand to full-day kindergarten, this will facilitate that expansion. Schools without that physical capacity or teacher capacity won't be able to do this, and we will further decrease the uniformity of education across the state. Our Constitution directs that we provide public schools in a general, uniform, and thorough manner. This will make it less uniform across the state. We have better options, I think better ways to increase the reading performance of our K through 3 children, and I would encourage those, and maybe look at the alternative of increasing teacher pay, especially for these lower grades. Thank you.
Lady from 10.
Thank you, Speaker. I don't think that it's asking for new programs, but I will say that how this is very different is it's looking at a growth model. So looking for a year's growth in a year's time. And that is a very different model than what we've been looking at before, which it was if they were not proficient, that they were funded for those students. So I think that it allows teachers to recognize that they're going to be focusing on all students, even the students at the top, so that they're making a year's growth in a year's time. So it's going from below basic to basic, from basic to proficient to excelling. And so I think from that standpoint, it allows more flexibility in the schools. It allows those teachers to do the things that they think are right in order to help all kids get where they want to be, and that is all of them reading by the end of 3rd grade. We want results. We've changed how we're asking them to show those results. I think it's well worth the money to do that. Thank you. I'm in support, obviously.
Is there further debate?
Mr.
Point
Speaker,
one.
would the good gentleman from 9 stand for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Gentleman yield.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, do we have, having completed the recent census, do we have a head count for the number, or approximation of the number of children 3rd grade and under?
Gentleman from 9.
Around 20,000 per grade level, so you're in a ballpark 80,000 students.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, follow up.
Will the gentleman yield to another question? Gentleman yields.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll take back the follow-up and just mention a couple of things.
You have the floor to debate.
20,000 into 72 million seems like a lot of money per student. And it seems like we're not, maybe we could find efficient ways of spending the money. It just seems like an awful lot, like I said, per student, and maybe we need to rethink the amounts.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 4.
For a question of the sponsor, Mr. Speaker.
Will the bill sponsor yield to another question?
Get my exercise. Happy to.
That's a yes.
Thank you. I have some indecision. I share some of the concerns of the good gentleman from 34, and I always listen to the good lady of 10. So correct me, but I'm seeing a different funding model, or at least it was disclosed. We now do not, half of it goes to districts, but the other half you have to be showing improvement. Is that correct? To be able to get the money as opposed to just sending the money out.
Gentleman from 9.
Mr. Speaker, so right now we're sending it out based on how many kids fail the fall IRI. It's a disincentive. This bill will send half of it out on enrollment, half of it out on as you said, to continue to move ahead.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Gentleman from 24.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to address a couple of comments. One is the statement that this is ongoing, and the answer is this bill is not an appropriation bill. This bill is saying that from this point forward, we're going to start distributing any literacy money. The money we've been doing in the past would be impacted by this. Any future monies would be impacted. That we're not going to distribute this money based upon failure. We're going to start distributing this money based, half of it, upon success. And the other half, of course, is going out enrollment. Part of the point is, if you think about it, you have a classroom with students, 20, 25 students, and half of them are proficient, half are not. You don't just ignore half. So sending money out to these teachers so they can maintain their proper education for all of their students is important, but the schools are going to be incentivized to get their students to move from below basic to basic, basic to proficient, and maintain their proficiency, and I think that's important to know. The $46 million mentioned in this bill, again, this is not an appropriation bill. This is saying if that money is appropriated, this section of code will now cover how that money will be distributed and utilized. The other thing, when we talk about test scores, and I know that last week we saw a schedule on this and saying how does this compare? The IRA scores were dramatically changed in about 2019, I think it was, 2020. And it went from being just a test where students had to recognize sounds, be able to read a word, or read quickly, but have no comprehension. They could have no comprehension and they would pass an IRI. The new IRI scores looks at comprehension, and it's much more difficult for a student to say they are achieving these test results with their IRI scores. So the test is, if you might want to describe it as, more comprehensive in determining how a child's literacy is growing. And whether or not this is uniform or not, I guess we can argue that, but I think this is a more uniform way of distributing the money, because we're not distributing it only on failure, we're distributing it to schools based upon half on their enrollment and half on success. I think that this makes a lot of sense, the changes here, and the disclosures that are required in the back also brings accountability to the school districts to make sure when they come out with a supplemental levy, they're saying what the money will be used for and report back to their school districts and how it was used. And I think that's an important addition to this bill compared to prior versions. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you can see a reason to vote this as a green light. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Good lady from 31.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if the good gentleman from 9 would yield to a question.
Will the gentleman yield to a question?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm looking on page 3 of the bill, on line 6, 7-ish, where we're talking about economically disadvantaged students being counted as 1 3/4 of students for the purpose of calculating the distribution of the funds. Can you help me understand how you define an economically disadvantaged student and how this impacts the distribution of funding?
Gentleman from 9.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, good lady. So there's a tremendous amount of research that shows that economically disadvantaged kids they come in lower and they are very difficult to move up. And obviously our economy needs these kids to be able to read. So they are more expensive and they're tougher to get up. And districts with lots of those kids are going to be behind. So if you don't put that in there, this would favor districts with kids that were not economically disadvantaged. This levels the playing field for all school districts. And it gives the school districts with those type of students some additional resources to work with those kids.
Is there further debate?
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield to an additional question?
Will the gentleman yield to another question?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm still looking for a definition of an economically disadvantaged student, and if you could give me any statistics that would help me understand how this affects the distribution of the funding as far as
The gentleman is
projections.
having a hard time hearing you. Speak up, please.
Okay. Is that better?
That's a little
My
better.
apologies. I'm still looking for how we define an economically disadvantaged student and what your expectations would be as far as how this 1.75 weighting for those students will affect the ultimate distribution of the funds.
Gentleman from 9.
Mr. Speaker, that definition is in Idaho code. We put it in a couple years ago when we were working on the funding formula. And so school districts have access to the information. The state has how many kids, which kids are on food stamps, which kids are on Medicaid, which kids are in Taffy. The school districts have all that information. And in some cases, they'll do surveys to finish the rest of it. Mr. Speaker, I want to add, the school districts already turn this information in for the ISAT grades 3 through 8 in high school. So the school districts are already gathering this for all those grades. And they already have most of the information for these kids, and they may have to do a survey. Some school districts may have to do a survey. But that information is statutory, and the State Department's ready to help anyone that has a hard time.
Thank you. Further debate?
Mr. Speaker, I'm still looking for a part of the answer to my question. May I ask one more follow-up question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm still wondering if we have some kind of a forward-looking projection as to how that 1.75 weighting is going to affect the distribution of the funds.
Mr. Speaker, I heard the 1.75 is going to affect weighting, and then that's the last I heard.
Try it again, good lady. Speak up. Turn
Thank you.
around, possibly.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, I'm just trying to understand how we anticipate that weighting is going to affect the distribution of the funds. Are we talking about a large population of pupils? Do we have some forward-looking statistics about what this means?
Gentleman from 9.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, so that 1.75 was arrived at with a lot of discussion with people who know a lot about this. State Department people, State Board, school districts, and what it is what is the amount, how much additional of a fraction would those school districts need to have a level playing field so that over time, if everybody was getting their kids proficient, that over time this would level out to be roughly a distribution that would be fair and equitable to everyone. So those school districts with lots of these kids are at a disadvantage to start. And so if they can get those kids, so in other words, instead of getting $1,000, they would get $1,750. Actually, so that's more than they're actually going to get. But they would get additional resources, and over time, this should level out for the whole state. If 175 isn't right, we think it's right. Everybody involved in this agreed to go with that number, and if it needs to be 1.8, 1.7, over time we'll look at that.
Gentleman from 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In committee, I reluctantly voted for this bill. And I have always wanted us to have a full-fledged discussion about all-day kindergarten. I have thought that it would be important for us to have that policy discussion. We have not had that policy discussion, and yet the bulldozer is coming down the sidewalk for full-day kindergarten. This bill now is written, taking out Section 33-1807 of Idaho Code, opens up the door wide open for full-day kindergarten, and everybody knows it. This is, in fact, a full-day kindergarten bill. And I think I've changed my mind, and I'm going to vote no. We have not had the policy discussion that represents many households, many families in this state who do not want their 5-year-old to be in a full-day kindergarten. But this is the juggernaut coming down the road. We're determined to fund it. The funding's in the larger bill. You'll have to vote no on the entire bill to fund the child portion of the education. I am deeply concerned about what we've done here, and I wish there were some other option. I wish that we would have a full discussion about full-day kindergarten. We have not talked about the research honestly. We don't have the research that honestly shows whether it's good or bad. We have not considered the hundreds of families in this state who do not want their 5-year-old in a full-day kindergarten. We have not done any of those things, and I think I've changed my mind. I'm voting no here, and I may vote no for the funding that is coming headlong to make this a full-day kindergarten bill.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 15.
For a question for the sponsor, Mr.
Will the good gentleman yield to another question?
Yes.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman. Can you just, in the changes that have taken place, to what extent is this optional or voluntary? Has any of that aspect of this bill changed from what was originally shown?
Going from 9.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, this is completely optional. If a school district does full-day kindergarten, they don't get any additional funds. You're funded on a head count. How many kids are going? Half day or full day, it's the same amount for either one. So this is not, that's not, and it's, I don't know if that answered his entire question.
Hearing none, will the gentleman stand and close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good questions, great questions, a lot of good, lively discussion. I do want to say something about the last comment the good gentleman here in front of me said about 33-1807. That actually doesn't change whether you can use it for full-time kindergarten. This bill, I think I sent a chart out the other day, 44% of all full-day K costs that are being paid now are using this money. So taking that out does not open up the gates whatsoever for full-day K. It doesn't actually change anything except for giving school districts more flexibility on how they spend the money so they can get the kids to read. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we've covered the subject and appreciated the fantastic debate and questions, and hope you can give it a green light.
Thank you. Debate is closed. The question before us is, shall House Bill number 790 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes. Has every member voted? Are there members that wish to change their vote? The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. The vote count shows 40 in favor with 29 against and 1 absent. House Bill number 790 has passed the House and be transmitted to the Senate.